Welcome back. I'm Kim Bailey. She's Fulyana Osborne. This is Inside Exec. Today we're going to talk about the benefits of taking on older methods of doing things, even ancient methods of doing things, and in that sense also taking on people within your organisation who perhaps have been retired or moved out of the workforce for many years, and see what benefits we can gain for the organisation and for individuals within the organisation by following that sort of a practice.
I'm going to share with you experience I had recently. I was talking to a person who's been in the recruitment industry for a long time, well known, it's global, just chatting about what's happening in that space, how is the world going. We talked about everything that you already know about that's on the news. People are moving from one employer to another. They're looking at the balance and all of that. So there's lots of activity. There's a lot of things happening. The bit that I want to cover today, though, about a story where a person was hired by the recruitment company to work for them as distinct from working for the clients. The person's 73 years old. And whilst, everybody says the right thing about no bias on age or whatever else, some people actually mean it and some people are a little bit nervous about it. So in this case, a case was put up to the management team to say, well, this person is the right person for the job and we really should hire them and why. And then they used examples of, when you look at ancient times, you know that we always went to the wiser, the elder, not because they're old, but because of their experience and knowledge, and they've seen things unfold, whether it's weather patterns, whether it is on the farming side, whether it is on the community, things being tried, tested, some failed, some succeeded. That's being used, so we give it a go. Reluctantly, the group signed off on hiring this person. The person has been in a job over 12 months now, and apparently the benefits have been enormous. And what had happened there, firstly, that person was not really looking for work because they needed the money. They looking for work because they wanted to be involved. They wanted to know they're good at this and they want to continue to do it. So the person had an excellent network globally. So that was a good thing. Secondly, they were not motivated by the next career move or by the bonus or the becoming a partner, not motivated by that. They're just seriously motivated by the satisfaction of what they do. What ended up happening is apparently statistically, there was success on all fronts. One is business came in the door and repeat business, again, back from the communication and that, hiring executives, middle and top management levels. The other thing is the person said, can I do it my way? And they said, yeah, what's that? And they said, one of the things I like to do is, I know there's a contract between our client and ourselves and how it works. I want to add a bit without cost, which is I'll continue to work with the person that is being selected and accepted by the client organization. I'll keep in touch with them for 3 months. And during that 3 months, I'll make sure that things are all right and everybody's happy, particularly the individual. In a way, he became the mentor, if you like, or the partner of success, as he called it. The clients were delighted with that. It didn't cost them anything. The person was happy because they thought, I can talk to someone who knows, who's independent, and if there is anything, how to tackle something. So that happened. And the other results that were good was the employees within the organization, that recruitment agency, were always going to him and asking him at, functions and that, picking his brains, and he's so happy given it. That was great. The business side, the dollar sign was very positive, repeat business and new referrals. The employee survey was very positive about that. And the client survey satisfaction was also very positive. So when they said, oh, this is, a great idea, the person said, well, it's not my idea. Again, when you've been around as long as me, you just know. Firstly, there is a program by the government right now, which is in Australia, which is a pre-apprenticeship program, even preparing people to become an apprentice. And they run by agencies funded by the government, or at least partially funded by the government. And the method I'm using is the same. So you're partnering with that school-age person who's trying to decide whether they want to be an apprentice or not, and you guide them through it. In the apprenticeship space, the same methodology is used. The apprentice has got continuity by the company who matches the apprentice to the company. So I'm just using things that have been used before, share your knowledge, bring examples to light, what worked, what didn't work, and how can we make it work in this environment. Share your knowledge and be generous in sharing it for no personal gain, and use modern and ancient methods to make things happen. So what I'm doing here is nothing special. So that's really the outcome.
Interesting too that there's been 2 series of programs here in Australia on ABC about generational interaction. One was with older people, so in their 80s and 90s, with under 5-year-olds.
Yes.
And then the second one was a similar age group of people, but with teenagers. And interestingly, obviously, the broadest spectrum between the under 5s and the over 80s, they could see them as grandparents and they could see them as, in a different framework. But looking at the teenagers and the interaction that they had with these other participants in the show was fascinating to me, because the teenagers were ones who were very well versed in what is current, what is happening now, and how they need to approach their lives. They still had all the sorts of anxieties and concerns that we probably had as teenagers, perhaps in some areas a little bit more concentrated than others. But the opportunity for these people who had life experience and work experience and all sorts of other experiences to talk to these people and bring some other kind of structure to their lives. And the one episode that I was reminded of was where the young people had to get up and be part of a debating team. And there were some in that team who absolutely did not want to get up in front of the group and speak to anyone. As you know, that's a situation that I deal with very frequently with adults of all ages. But to see these young people and to see the different approaches that the senior people took in encouraging the younger ones to say something, whether it was just, we'll get these notes down, we'll do it together, I'll stand beside you, whatever else it was, that these younger people were keen to find out what it was they could do. What is the answer? They were open to someone saying to them, do it this way, try it this way. And what it reinforced was that we can learn from everyone, because then the tables were turned, because then they had to do a dance for a concert that they were having. Yeah. And the younger people sort of pulled up their phones and said, we'll do it like this on TikTok. And the others were looking at it saying, where did you find that on your phone? I can see the moves they're doing, but how am I going to learn this? And how do I hold the phone at the same time as I'm trying to learn it? And so there was that sharing of information. And I think in these situations where we're looking at it in the workforce, it's really important to find that common ground where you can share information and where you're both benefiting from doing that activity. The other example I have is out of the floral art world. For many years, probably 30 or 40 years, the bonus in doing designs was what we call floral foam, or more commonly called Oasis, because that's the brand of it. It's a green foam block, soak in water, and you put your flowers or your plant material in, and it holds it in place perfectly. And so it's been used for a long time. 10 years ago, Europe started to ban it. And here we couldn't understand why they were banning it, because there wasn't a lot of information coming out. But as time progressed, we found out that it is full of microplastics, which we know are not good for the environment. It doesn't break down. So that the move gradually got momentum, and so people were using less and less foam. But to try and create these designs and have them have the plant material in a water source and to have it still looking the way you wanted it to, we went back to what systems and activities that they were doing before floral foam was introduced.
Yeah.
So we go back to using chicken wire in
Mhm.
designs and containers and looking at things a different way. Obviously, we've got some more modern approaches that we can use apart from the traditional ones, but we did go back and we did learn from people who had always done it that way, had
Yeah.
never used foam in the past.
Yeah.
And so we'd bring them in and say, show us how to do it, because we don't know where to start. Where there was no literature about it. There was nothing we could go back to say, oh,
Yeah.
how is it done? So now there's a whole range of new literature out that says this is how you do it. And I think in the arts and crafts field, you could probably find a whole host of examples of where people are going back to traditional crafts or
Yes.
traditional ways of producing things that are art or craft in that sense.
On the same topic and on sharing information and learning from others before us, we've got another example. I was at a function and I was talking to a person who retired. He called himself retired. We're saying, oh, what do you do? What I do? And sort of we're sharing that bit. He shared with me that he was the founder of a law firm. The law firm is very successful and went through for many years, etc. He's at the point where he wanted to retire, so he had a pretty well thought through succession plan and was very well executed as well. He wasn't ready to leave it altogether, so part of the arrangement was that he would be on the board. He was on the board and, of course, his contacts and connections and all of that. And that was going all right for a bit. And then he said he was getting a little bit toey, he called it, and frustrated because he wanted to keep saying what they want to do, or they didn't have a conflict as such, but it was frustrating because they wanted to do something that he was so much against. And he's very desperate to want to drive again, as he put it. It got to the point where he thought, you know what, I think for both our sanity, I think it's time for me to finish once this term finishes. And he finished. And he said, I was happy with that. And they did try to be polite and ask him to stay and all of that, but he didn't. And he said, no, time has come for me to cut the strings. Anyhow, he's there, and then one day he gets a call from a person, and the person is on one of those programs that used in lots of those companies where they look for graduates that they fast track through the organization and they bring them in. And the idea is that on merit and on all of that, eventually they'll be partners, but it's a fast track. This is supposed to be a little boy genius who got this mark and that mark and you know, all of that. This person, if I just call the graduate, I'll just for one of better words, and the retired founder. So the graduate will contacted the retired founder and ask if he could have coffee with me. And he said, oh yeah, what for? And he says, I'll tell you over coffee. And he says, I've just been hired by such and such firm. I'm very good, you know. And the old guy says, oh, yes, I just imagine you would be, you know, being sarcastic. And he says, no, I am. I taught them this and my way of thinking and blah, blah, blah. And then I went through these interviews and all of that. And I'm really proud of that. And he says, that's the easy part. He says, the hard part is I don't have any years of experience. He said to him, yeah, all right. And he said, you already hired, so you didn't come here to ask me to put in a good word or anything. And he said, no, not at all. He said, I really want your experience. And he says, what do you mean you want my experience? You have to go and work as many years as I have. Mm. And he said, well, no, because I really know a shortcut. He said, okay, what's this shortcut? And he says, how about we have a series? So from that meeting, they liked each other. You could tell. So the retired founder says to me, there was something about him that I liked. He's a bit cheeky, arrogant, and all of that, but there was much more endearing features about him. So I thought, anyway, I said it was all above board. The company And there was no conflict of interest or anything like that. So anyway, so they're having series of coffee meetings, right? And so they do that, and then he would say things like different scenarios. Says, "Oh, I've noticed they're doing blah blah blah, and I was noticed that and that." The retired guy says, "You've got to be very careful here, because what I tell you is a good thing is what they're saying that's rubbish, because not in this day and age, and vice versa." He says, "Yeah, I'll take that into account, and we always have to come back to that point. So be careful." Anyway, so all good. They done that. And then he says, "Okay, I want to run something past you," and he will run it. And they will do what we used to call objection handling clinics. So put holes in it, be the devil's advocate. They do that. No, they were doing it. Anyway, this guy has been there, 12 months or so, and doing all right, and the company is happy with him. And then he comes up with an idea, and the idea was a little bit way out, but he had demonstrated, all the pros and cons and why they should give it a go. And they did, and it was all right. I mean, had a lot of convincing and trial and, proof of concept and all of that. It was all right. Then another idea, and, I'm not talking about one after the other. There's time in between and all of that fun. Anyway, they thought he's a little genius and wise beyond his years. Anyhow, he said to the retired guy, "Look, I'm being called in for a performance review by the panel now, and have I got your permission to say we've been having coffee and my wisdom is really not mine?" And the guy says, "Okay." And he says, "So you're not as arrogant as I thought you were." He laughed. So I said, "Okay." So off he goes in the meeting, and then he says, "Well, we use the word accelerate my training, accelerate my education," which I did, and I did really well. "And you hired me because blah, blah, blah. But one thing I needed badly is experience. And I found a way to accelerate my experience." And they were all ears. And he says, "The wisdom of others who've been there successful way before I was born." Then he told the story how he made the coffee and all that. And he said, and they sat there and they were a little bit shocked, because they could have used that talent on that committee. And again, the rest is obvious, I suppose. But there's a huge example of how, instead of going, "Well, that's the old way, this is the new way," is how we combine them both and how we utilize the wisdom. This guy was smart enough to suck 30, 40 years of experience to use it for testing some of his new ideas.
It's about that combination of the experience and the knowledge that's gained from that experience and the new situation, the new reality, and seeing how that can relate to what's happening now. And it's no different to all of the times in the past podcasts where we've talked about coming up with a new idea, and people say to you, "We've tried it before, it didn't work." What didn't work then? What's different now? And it's that same concept. It's just looking at it from a much more rich resource than individuals talking in a meeting.
Also, not just to have the old ideas, the old experience, is having that dynamic, new, fresh way of looking at things and prepared to take calculated risk, but smart enough to do the homework. And I think that's why it's all of a sudden goes to exceptional level rather than fantastic.
And we don't have to invent or reinvent things all the time. There are elements of experience that we can bring into any situation within our industry or outside of our industry that make the composite decision a better decision and a better way forward. There we have it, our ideas on utilising more experience than you can find in your organisations at this point in time. I'm Kim Bailey, she's Fulyana Osborne, and this is Inside Exec.